Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Wonderful Chile and I'm happy to have you back. It's been a while coming off air, but I tell you we're back, we're stronger, we're better, and we're ready to hit the ground running. And as someone who consistently loves to teach about wisdom, I draw from the experiences of the great teacher King Solomon and his writings in Ecclesiastes, where he often say that I returned and I saw. I believe that not everybody gets the opportunity to say that they returned and saw, but for those who return and see things, it's important that they document what they've seen. Albert Einstein said science is the systematic classification of experience. I'd like you to write that down. Science is the systematic classification of experience. So what you call science is people that have found a way to document what they learned, and over time we now begin to test it and you see that it works. Today I'm going to be beginning a 5-part series of something that is brilliant. I'm actually going to be reviewing a book that goes by the title How the Mighty Fall and Why Great Companies Never Give In. But I like to stay with How the Mighty Fall. This book is a book by Jim Collins, and it's a book that he got inspired when he was invited to speak to some very serious top-ranking officers in the US Army. As he went, he was thinking what to talk to them, and it occurred to him that the best way to teach effectively was not to try to come up with the right answer, but to come up with the right questions. I believe I've dealt with this in another episode. As he began to ask questions, the questions started to rise about whether America was really retaining its position of greatness, or that they were on the cusps. As he studied that, it caused him to begin a deep study about how the mighty fall, and eventually came to what they call 5 stages of decline. I'm going to be taking them step by step. I'll talk about all 5 of them, and then I'll try to stay with the first one today. So today's video is entitled Hubris, Born of Success. But the 5 stages of decline follow a particular pattern. You have the first one is called Hubris, Born of Success. The second one is undisciplined pursuit of more. The third one is denial of risk and peril. The fourth one is gasping for salvation. The fifth one is capitulation into insignificance and death. And I dare add, and oblivion. So what does this mean? It means that every person that was once great can become insignificant and fall into oblivion. But people can retain their greatness over time and remain steadfast in the things that they do. But the recipe for it is an understanding that there is what is called the silent creep of doom. Today, I'm going to try to dwell on hubris, born of success. Hubris, as you know the word, is from the Greek mythology, where people begin to forget what made them great in the first place. And when what replaces why. So a company grows to the point of saying, we are great because we do X, Y, Z. That company has set itself up for success, or for failure, I beg your pardon. And the real question that should be asked is, we are great because we do X, Y, Z. But we are great because we know why we do X, Y, Z. The understanding of the why behind the what is what makes you able to reinvent when the why begins to lose relevance. We've heard the story of how BlackBerry went out of vogue because they failed to pay attention to their why in the days that the iPhone Apple began to rise. They felt that people were loving all the QWERTY keyboarding, and when Apple started to introduce its flat screen, touch screen, they didn't see it as a threat because of the markets they had. So hubris, born of success, simply says that you can become so successful that you begin to neglect what the Bible calls time and chance happening to them all. when we teach about innovation, we teach about the unexpected outside event. That is events that cause you to prosper that you didn't have a hand in. And I'll try to talk about this in another video. I'm not going to try to waste your time. But hubris born of success is the first place that any leader, any person, I'm not talking for organization, I'm talking as a person. You look at the life of Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 4. He says, he begins to write, he says, I thought it good to show you the signs and wonders that the high God had brought toward me. How great are his signs? And he goes ahead. And then, but the question before him was that he had a dream and nobody could interpret it. And Daniel began to tell him that in your visions you saw the tree that grew and the height that reached up to heaven, and the sight was all over the whole earth. You know, the leaves were fair, the fruit and all of that. And a hand, a watcher and a holy one came and cut down the tree. I said, leave this stump. And Daniel began to interpret his dream and warned him that he should let his heart, that his heart should not be swayed into thinking that he had built an enormous empire for himself. But did he listen? No. A year later, he was on his roof working and he said, is this not Babylon that my hands have built? It occurs to me that at every point in time, Dr. Michael Dodd would say that every step towards self-sufficiency is a step away from God. What areas of your life have you thought that you built capacity and you no longer pay attention to the individual efforts, the things, the outside opportunities, the people that helped you? You've grown so much, you begin to think that you are responsible for your success. You know, where are you refusing to give God the glory? You look at the life of Nebuchadnezzar, how that God brought him low in one fell swoop. And the same thing happened to his son Belteshazzar. And another day we saw the same thing happen to what's his name, Herod, you know, and we saw it with King Saul. And it just continues to appear that when God raises a man from the doldrums, God expects that man to consistently pay attention to the things that raised him. But that was the place of prayer, it was the place of study, it was the books you read, it was capacity development. We must not grow so much to the point that we no longer pay attention to the things that brought us to that point. So for the stage one, where we talk of hubris, these are the closing points that Jim Collins has to say as he rounds up. He says that the markers for stage one, things that you see. One is that you begin to have a success entitlement, what we call an arrogance. Success is viewed as deserved rather than fortuitous, fleeting, or even hard-earned in the face of daunting odds. People begin to believe that success will continue almost no matter what organization decides to do or not do. Number two, there is a neglect of a primary flywheel. There is something, the prodigal son woke up one day, and I've always said, I say to people that listen, I say there's an end to foolishness, you know, and that end to foolishness can be in two ways. End to foolishness can be systemic, it can be strategic. It can be systemic or it can be catastrophic, you know. So when you hear that the prodigal son woke up one day and just said, Kai, what am I doing here? I have to stand up and go back to my father's house and everything. That was a systemic end to foolishness. But the catastrophic end to foolishness is the one where you have a handwriting on the wall having to tell you that your days are ended. You know, that's the one that they say, he that is being often reproved, hardening his heart, shall be suddenly destroyed. So you begin to neglect something that was primary in your growth stage. You know, you're distracted by challenge, adventures, and opportunities. Leaders begin to neglect a primary flywheel, failing to renew it with the same creative intensity that made it great in the first place. Number three, I mentioned already, where the what replaces why. The rhetoric of success, we are successful because we do these specific things, replaces understanding and insight, where you say, we are successful because we understand why we do these specific things and under what conditions they will no longer work. Number four is decline in learning orientation. Leaders lose the inquisitiveness and learning orientation that mark those truly great individuals who, no matter how successful they become, they maintain the learning curve as steep as when they first began their careers. Mr. Nelson Kunda, my mentor, usually says that The hard posture of a learner is the assumption of ignorance. And I believe that every time that you're learning and growing and believing that you don't know the things that you know, you have created an opportunity for far greater learning. Finally, discounting the role of luck. Instead of acknowledging that there's a higher power that works, Nebuchadnezzar said that it is to the intent that you may know that God ruleth in the affairs of men, and he places people as kings and debases others. Instead of acknowledging the higher powers that are at work and how fortuitous events might have played a role, people begin to presume that success is due entirely to the superior qualities of the enterprise and its leadership, and that marks the beginning of failure. So I'll close with saying that Martin Luther has said that every step towards self-sufficiency is a step away from God. And as believers and as people that want to grow and become very wise, this is a call to say you must never allow yourself develop hubris that is born out of success. You must always understand the things that contributed to your growth in the first place and look for how it can be sustained. I hope this has blessed you. I'll see you in the next one.